light the top one first, whichever you're gonna light. Yeah.
The shamus is the middle, Manuel.
I know.
Ashik.
Lahadlik.
Lahadlik Ner. Shel. Amen. Baruch. She'asa. Nisim. Lavosenu. Bayamim. Hahem. Bazman. Hazeh. Amen. Ma'osur Yeshuati Lechana Elishabeach Tikon Beis Tefilati Visham Toda Nizabeach Le'et Tachin Matbeach Mitzar Hamna Beach Azegmor Bashir Mizmor Chanukat HaMizbeach Azegmor Bashir Mizmor Chanukat HaMizbeach Rock of Ages, let our song praise thy saving power. Though amidst a raging foe wast our sheltering tower, furious they assailed us, but thine arm availed us, and thy word broke their sword when our own strength failed us, and thy word broke their sword when our own strength failed us.
Yeah. Can I ask that question?
Is it doing the same thing now that it was with the last time?
No, now it's doing what it should do. Now it's blinking off and on. Before, when you first start thinking, it was not blinking.
Oh,
bet
So
it's
you
not
better start
recorded.
all over.
okay, let me just start all over again. We're at the home of Manuel and Helen Denn on December 28, 1989, here in Bay City, Texas. I'll start again by introducing everyone here this evening, the three Denn brothers and their wives, the children of Joe and Blema Denn. The oldest son is Herman A. Denn, Herman Abram Denn, and his wife Rosie Ray Würzburg Denn. The second son, Sidney Denn, and Gertie Denn. Sidney Denn is my father, my mother, Gertrude Estelle Rosenzweig Denn, again.
Please.
Helen Mala Denn, and the youngest son, Manuel Denn.
Oh my.
Amen. Were there any middle names? No, you didn't have a middle name, right? And Dad, you had no middle name
Only
either.
Herman has a middle name.
Only Herman. You?
My middle name, Meyer,
Yes.
is not Avram. My middle name is
Hi, Herman, right? It's Abraham
Right.
Herman Denn.
Abraham Herman Denn. Avram Haya.
So why did it go in that order?
Well, I think when I went to school, I didn't want to use the name Abraham.
Uh-huh.
So I switched it around, Herman A. Denn.
You recall that was your own conscious decision that you wanted to be
That was
called.
my own conscience.
You like the name Herman better.
Right.
Okay, let's start off in a different direction. First of all,
Before you get started, may I say a few words?
sure.
You asked for the first recollections.
Mm-hmm.
The first recollections, my Gutsaica mama used to tell us. Then when she got married, she was left to come to America. She was a baby, and she was the last one at home. And they left on a Yunta, one night out after Yunta. I want to say,
It must have been Pesach.
no,
They wouldn't have
Sukkot.
gone. They wouldn't have gone.
It's either Sukkot
Simchas
or
Torah.
Purim. Sukkot or Purim.
Uh-huh.
And after the Shuntif, the Gutsaica mama kissed her mother and father, and they got on a wagon, and they started to the port. And the mama, she saw the mom and the grandpa was crying so bad, they got about 3 miles from the home, and they said they couldn't go. The Gutsaica mama said, I can't go. I've got to go back and see if my mother and father's all right. I can't leave, knowing that they were unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
So they went back, and it was late at night, and the grandparents had already gone to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And she saw that they were all right, so they got back on the buggy, and they went on to the port in Germany. I think they went to
They left from
Bremerhaven,
Bremerhaven.
Bremerhaven, Germany.
May I say something? You said y'all said you couldn't remember when they got married, but they always celebrated their anniversary, excuse me, on May the 4th. Does that mean anything?
No, May the 4th is when they're supposed to be born.
No, Mama was born May the 4th.
Well, didn't they have an anniversary they celebrated?
I don't remember.
I don't reckon. Now I know this to be a fact. It was after they left. I don't know what the anniversary. I'm saying this is when they left
Oh, maybe it was a
Czechoslovakia to come to the United States.
Uh-huh.
And this is a story she always related. Then on the boat, there was a nephew that they brought back with them, was a nephew of Uncle Goldman. His name was Birnbaum.
Uh-huh.
And she tells a story. The Gutsaka Mama had a what do you call it?
Cycle.
A cycle.
Cycle.
And
Okay.
the boy got sick on the boat, and at night he threw up on the cycle and ruined her whole hair now.
Uh-huh.
And she couldn't wear it anymore. And because the Gutsaka Mama was very religious, they wore she wore a shape.
Uh-huh.
Then they tell the story of when they got to New York, this uncle, they met him at the boat, the Gutsaka Uncle Benny Wadler,
Uh-huh.
saw him, and he said, in America they can't do stuff like this. So he says, Joe, come on, I'm going to take you for a walk around New York and show you in New York. So he goes and he takes him into his barber shop,
Yeah.
and he tells the barber,
Cut his beard off.
cut the beard off, but he didn't say it. He said it in English, so the Gutsaka Pa wouldn't know what he said.
Yeah.
So Pa was sitting there, and the guy working, with the razor and everything.
Yeah.
And then when he got up, the whole beard fell down his lap.
Yeah, so what,
And he went back home and said, Blima says, I found a light slide.
who said this?
The Gutsaka men went into the house first and told
Uh-huh.
the Gutsaka Mama and the Gutsaka and Doris says, I found a light slide from the same country you were from, same city you came from in China. I'm going to bring him in and see if you can recognize it.
Yeah.
And she brought the Gutsaka Pop in. She liked the fade.
Really?
She didn't recognize who he was. She didn't know he was a stranger.
But
Do you remember that story?
I remember that story.
Uh-huh.
I remember that story. I don't remember. It's not very clear about coming, when it came. But as Sidney was speaking, I could remember that they did get on the wagon as he said, and they did go back to the house. But my recollection, other recollections, other than those, those two instances, I don't recall.
Did you ever say anything about Chatisna? Did they ever talk about Chatisna?
They never talked too much. All we knew was the city. They did get
later.
They
in
always made jokes about Chatisna.
They made jokes about Chatisna.
Pop would always say, well, Chatisna.
Uh-huh.
He called Mama from Chatisna.
What about when the brothers and sisters used to get together? Did they ever talk about Chatisna or anything? Or the people from Chatisna?
Uncle Benny and Pop was always joking about
But
Chatisna.
Uncle Benny didn't know anything about Chatisna.
No,
No,
he
he-
wasn't from
He
Chittagong.
wasn't from there.
No.
I don't know where Uncle Ben Water was
He's Galiciano. He was from
He was
Poland.
a character, always joking.
Never had nothing but a smile. Never had nothing but
That leads me to the next question. Let me ask you. And Pop never talked about Corchin. Not too much, or Poland or anything.
not too much.
The only thing he would say, the Gutsaka Pop says, he remembered when he was a young boy, they took him to a cheder, and they wrapped him in a tallis. It was so cold, and they took him to the cheder, and he was a hussy. He went to, I don't know how long he went, and of course his father died when he was a young boy.
Yes, he didn't need
And he didn't get much schooling, but he did get cheder. He learned a lot of the Humish and all that.
Do you ever talk about his father?
Not too much. He told us he died from, I think, consumption.
Probably tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis.
those days they
They called it consumption.
Uh-huh.
Papa did tell us, though, is that his father was in a tobacco business, and they smuggled tobacco from one side of the border to the other. That's how they earned their
In the
living.
tobacco business.
And also, he told us that he used when he went to the service, about when he was in the army.
What did he say about the army?
He got as high as a corporal, I believe he said, and it was very hard. And he remembers that the rabbi told him he wasn't eating; he was starving to death. And the rabbi told him, "It's all right to eat the soup, but not the meat of the bones." He
Don't eat the meat. Don't eat around the bone. Don't eat
Don't eat
around
off the bone.
the bone.
When I went to the army, he told me the same
told
thing.
us
That's the same story.
Your father told you all the same thing when you,
That's right.
and he said because the rabbi had told him that when he was in Poland.
When you're in the army, you can do it.
Well, then you
For
can't.
living, for life is the most precious thing. He told us that the rabbis tell you that life is the most important thing. Life to live, you can do anything within means to exist, to continuous life, because life is more important than death.
What about? Let's talk a little bit about. We'll go back to your parents in a little bit, but describe some of your relatives that you grew up knowing. Let's start with the Schwartzes, Joe Schwartz and Fanny Schwartz. What can you say? What are some of your memories
I would
about?
like to start, if we have a start, I would like to start with the Guts Ache and Esther.
Okay.
Because the Guts Ache and Esther was just like a mother to us.
Mm-hmm.
She would, when we were sick, she stayed up with us. When we didn't have anything to eat, she saw that we did have things to eat. You can't describe. She was what you would call an Aces Haya, a true Aces Haya. There's no one other than my mother that would be greater to me. She would be like a Sarah.
Like a what?
Like
Yeah.
Sarah or one of the patriots.
So Aunt Esther played a very important. I know she played a very important role in your lives.
Very
Definitely
important.
very important part of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
More so.
We could.
Well, she stayed up. You said she stayed up late with you when you were sick. Did your mother not stay up with you all when you were
Oh,
sick?
our mother stayed up
yes,
too,
yes.
but she would stay up with
Yeah,
mother,
that's
so she
different.
wouldn't be by herself. She wouldn't want my mother to have to sit by herself. And she loved her sisters. She done everything. Her whole life was around her family.
Family.
One time Herman cut his.
I jumped off of a roof one time behind that store and jumped on a nail.
Who did?
I did.
Herman did.
Oh,
And I didn't go to Mama because I was afraid she would be mad or worried about it. So I ran from our store to Aunt Esther's store. And Aunt Esther put me on her back and carried me to Dr. Scott's, he had a doctor's office where Secret's jewelry store is, behind Secret's jewelry store. That was his clinic. And that's the first time I had an experience with tetanus shots.
How old could you have been then?
I wish I could tell you.
What, she just closed the store down and took you over there?
She didn't close the store. She just left.
Just left.
That's the story.
Did you find that?
And another time, Herman was wading in the Cottonwood Creek and stepped on a bottle and cut his foot all the way to the bone.
I still carry that scar.
And the Guts Ache and Esther picked him up on her back again, and she wrapped it in a towel and took him to the same doctor again, Dr. Scott. And he gave him they put it in coal oil out there. They put his foot in coal oil to stop the bleeding.
Coal oil, by the way, is
Did it burn?
kerosene.
Kerosene?
Coal oil today is called kerosene.
Uh-huh.
We used to call it coal oil. And most of the stores at that time, they used it for, the homes used it for light.
And all kind of medication.
In the country, there was no electricity. So they used coal oil or kerosene for light in the kerosene lanterns. And also, they used it for medicinal purposes. And if I'm not mistaken, they used to drink kerosene.
Did they
So they put a little
Cook it?
sugar, for a cough.
Remember?
Keep it from cough when you cough.
Did they also use it to cook with?
No,
As a
well, they had
fuel?
kerosene stoves.
Yeah,
Sure, cooking fuel.
And
Esther-
Esther, she had a remedy for everything. She always had a remedy. If there was a flu epidemic, she
had a remedy for it.
She had a remedy for it if we got the flu, and also.
What would she? What
I
kind of
remember-
remedy? What kind of remedy would she use?
She used to tie
Acidity,
what they call it.
You remember those little packages?
Yeah,
It's going
tie a
The
string
children's
around her
store
neck
had it.
with a
Yellow
little
children's
bag of,
had it.
we call it, I don't know what aspidity is anymore.
Aspidity?
That must have garlic smell.
Garlic and everything in it.
I think,
Herbs.
I
They
think
were
that,
herbs.
I think that remedy was really,
They
taught
should
her, I was getting ready to say, I think the remedy was really, from the black people.
Slavery, the slavery.
They really, as a matter of fact, I have to mention this here, we made our living off of the black people.
Mm-hmm.
And they loved both Mama and Esther. It was unreal. Many times and Esther would, of course, charge them food. No one else would charge them anything.
Mm-hmm.
And she would charge food. Whenever they got money, they'd come in and they'd pay her. And
Not only did she
Well,
charge,
what business
She
were they
paid-
in?
a lot of times they,
And Esther had a grocery store a block away from Dad's.
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them
What
were
did your
hungry,
dad
but she feed
have?
them too.
Oh, yes, yes.
What did your father have?
When-
What did-
when-
My
they were
father had a
hungry.
Dad had a grocery business.
They were in
Uh-huh.
competition with
Uh,
each other.
Well, they wasn't in competition. And Esther also, when we went to started going to school, there was no way of us they were sure that, you know, we couldn't eat in the cafeteria, although they did have a
They
cafeteria.
didn't have
in
any
the school.
cafeterias. They had Miss Bates' little candy store right across the street from the school.
But at that time, we kept strictly kosher, and we couldn't go to the candy store where they had hamburgers, or ham sandwiches, or cheese
Yeah.
sandwiches. So the Gutsy and Esther would have a stove in the back of her store, and she would cook for us, and we would run from school to her store, and she'd feed us. And we'd run back and go back to school.
The aroma was unreal. Of course, it was all kosher and everything. But she used to
But
cook.
she used to-
You don't find these foods today in the grocery store. She'd cook melts. She would cook lungs. She would cook
Tongue,
Bailey,
tongue. What was that? It was another sweet
Bailey.
bread. What do you call it?
sweet bread.
Sweet bread.
sweet bread.
Today you can't get these foods
Mhm.
in the stores.
She cooked them well. They were well cooked. She'd cook.
Oh, yeah. Her food
And Esther was
superb.
a perfect cook.
She was a connoisseur.
She cooked- She cooked better than your
I'll
mother?
tell you one thing,
Oh,
you'll never
yes,
taste
yes.
like
The
she made
Gutsy Mama was a better
She
baker.
made
She baked
the
better.
shop better than anybody in the world.
Your mother was a better
Gutsy Mama
baker?
baked, every Thursday night, her and Esther would get together and they would make challahs for Shabbos. And the challah would last for the whole week.
Every Shabbos in your
Every Thursday night was a tradition that we'd get 8 challahs for the
How many?
8.
Eight
challahs.
They used 2, for Shabbos.
Your father used 2 every Shabbos. He
Every
used.
Shabbos
Uh-huh.
they used 2. And another thing reminds us, on Shabbos, a lot of time we used to always have fish. But when they couldn't get fish, they would take the white meat of the chicken
Chicken.
and chop it up
Make a filter
and make like
Bailey,
Bailey or like a filter fish out of chicken, the white
Uh-huh.
breast of the chicken.
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you something else I can remember about the challah. In that Esther stove, every time she put a challah in the oven, they took a piece of that challah and left it and burned. And one day I was cleaning it out, I must have found 50 pieces of that burnt challah in the bottom of her stove.
Yeah.
She
Really.
always pinched one piece off.
One
And
piece
what was
off.
the purpose of
That
taking
went
one
to God.
Oh,
That's
Wow.
I
right.
never knew one.
And it's just,
That's
That's what I think
Yeah.
they told
You
me.
have to do that. Yeah, that's right.
they always, that stuff was just brown, black.
What do you remember about the old man, about Julius Goldman? Uncle Manuel, you said you didn't remember him.
I don't remember it all.
I remember him, he was very kind to us. And I never saw him mistreat Aunt Esther. But I have been told by Dad that he did mistreat Aunt Esther.
Uh-huh.
But in front of us, he never did mistreat her.
Uh-huh. Was he a civil speaking kind of person?
He was a very quiet person. He never
Uh-huh.
talked much. But I remember when, like, they closed the store on Saturday night, and son, I'd sleep over in their little house behind the store, and he always brought a whole sack of money. We'd sit there and count the money
After
in
Shabbos?
the bed. That's the Shabbos.
Do you remember, Herman, whether Aunt Esther bought I remember that when I don't remember when he left, but I mean, somewhere in my memory, I heard or something. Didn't she give him half of whatever they had? when he left.
Yes,
If
we
I'm
did.
not
And money.
mistaken.
And money.
And money.
And let me
I think
tell
she got
you-
it from Uncle Joe. I don't know where she got the money.
And she paid him out. She did. And another thing about this here, see, Uncle Goldman was a Cohen. And Uncle Goldman, when he passed away, they found a letter in his room that the Gutsake, and he wrote to Gutsake and asked her about thanking her for giving him his share of what was right. And he wanted, and so in this letter, that's how they found out how to get in touch with him. They called the Gutsake and Esther and said that they found this man dead in the bathtub and want to know what they could do with him.
Did he die natural
And
causes
so,
or what?
being of a Cohen,
Uh-huh.
the ancestor said you can't bury him. They're gonna put him in a pauper grave. And she says, well, being a Cohen, it wouldn't be fair to let him go on a Goyish cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
So she and I think the Gutsake Papa and the Gutsake Uncle Minnie or the Gutsake
No,
Uncle
No,
Joe.
Joe, no, you're wrong, Sidney.
Herman.
I went to there with Herman Wadler. I went to Corpus Christi with Herman Wadler and picked him up.
But that's after
You
things
didn't
all
pick
set
him
up.
They say with
Yeah,
you.
but we went,
You went to get the body. You
That's
went to get,
right.
but I'm talking about before they went. They had to go in.
Prepare the body?
No, I don't know.
Identify the body and everything?
Identify the body. I think that she went to
She
identify
went
the
to
body.
identify.
She had to go with her and Papa and the Gutsake Minnie or Uncle Joe. I don't know which one of them
Maybe
was.
Herman and Herman.
And then
Walker.
later, y'all went and picked the body up and took it to Wharton to have it buried on.
Where did y'all take, how'd you get it? On the truck or something?
No, in a hearse. They took it in a hearse.
Oh.
They brought it in a hearse.
Aunt Esther paid all the expenses.
Yeah,
at
because he
his
was he
funeral.
didn't have nothing.
But she didn't.
She bought his grave and everything.
But she had her own plot already. She didn't. She.
No, he's
No,
not
she
buried
bought
on
a
her
plot.
plot.
She bought a plot
She
for
bought
him.
a plot just for him
Uh-huh.
and brought him
Is it in Wharton?
Yeah,
in Wharton.
he buried
You
him.
never seen it?
No.
Really?
It's on the side of the cemetery. It's on the far side of the
No,
cemetery.
it's on this
Down
side.
there, Ginsburg, that butcher, that
That's
shoe
on
man
the-
was in
This
there,
side,
right near to him.
right
It's
there.
on the same.
There were
side.
separate. There's separate plots. One
No,
plot's
it
of
wasn't that.
Individual
Has a
burial
full
spot.
Plot.
eight grave plot.
right, but
And off, if you're facing her,
from the far right hand side.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be on the far right hand side
Right.
behind.
About the middle of the cemetery.
Yeah, about the middle
Yeah.
of the
It's close to the
Gage,
fence, right?
but
Maybe
then-
one.
And Helen, you told me.
Butcher, he was a
He was
shoemaker.
a shoemaker.
Gage
Well, did
somebody.
he have any
Gabe,
brothers or sisters that you
Gabriel.
might know?
Gabriel.
The only one he had that I knew of was this Birnbaum. Wasn't he Uncle?
He was
That's
his
Uncle
only
Thomas'
nephew.
nephew.
His only nephew.
That's,
And he
Is he
came
still
from
living
Europe
in
with
that
Papa and Mama.
Uh-huh.
Also on the boat with Papa and Mama
I don't
was Miss Rose, Roseman from Galveston.
Oh, really?
I didn't know that.
That's a fact.
Huh. And Helen, you told me one time that Aunt Esther told you something about Kohanim. Didn't you?
Well, she just thinks they're very hard people. They're not.
She said about blue lips. Did you say about blue lips? You told me.
They're hard people. They're rather
Right,
mean.
arrogant.
I mean,
Very
group of
arrogant
people.
people.
Arrogant. I
Uh-huh.
think that is the word. And that many coins have like a bluer color lip. I
Uh-huh.
guess it distinguishes
right.
their bloodline.
Take a
or
look at my
something.
son-in-law.
Did she ever mention to any of you all about what's his name Goldman, how he treated her?
She
She
never
never
said a
never
bad
complained.
word about it, but I can remember.
Really?
She was real.
You saw one time, Dad?
Yeah, I saw one time he threw a peach can at her. A big number, 2.5 peach can.
Maliciously, I mean, not.
Well, he got mad and he just threw it at her and hit her. It hit her.
Really? You saw that? Did you? I mean, how old could you have been when you saw
I
that?
cried because I was very close to them.
Uh-huh.
He'd always carry us home, at night, and we'd stay with him all the time, and he was awful good. But when I saw that, I was it touched me being a child to see somebody hurt somebody like that, that you love.
See, they lived in 3 rooms behind their store.
As a part of the store, or was it a separate building?
No, it's the same building,
Uh-huh.
same building. they had 3 rooms in back. There was a kitchen and a sort of living room and then the bedroom. I do recall when I was a kid, they had a closet in the bedroom, and we'd climb up on the back of the closet and jump down on the bed. You remember that? We'd jump on the bed, and oh, we'd have a great time.
I remember.
We
You
spent
know how
hours
kids
at a
are.
time.
Y'all didn't get in trouble for that or anything?
No, they wouldn't holler at us.
No,
They would
I
pick-
remember one time Uncle Goldman made some home brew, and the apartment was on this side, and then there was a hall right next to the apartment, and that's where they stored all the home brew. And one night we heard a lot of explosions right there, and all the cats got popped off the brew.
Where did you hear the explosion? Where were you, in the store when you heard
And
it?
I was in the house.
spend the night there.
Y'all used to spend the night over there?
Oh, we
yeah.
used to spend the night there all the time.
Now, getting back to what you asked
Just
about,
when we're still on this
Yeah.
here, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chapman was a night watchman, and he came by. He always joked Dad that his soda water was exploding in the store.
Oh, really?
his root beer was good.
Pop
Of
also
course,
used to,
it was illegal at that time. It was during the prohibition.
Pop used to also have home brew. He used to make his own stuff.
Yeah, we made wine. I remember making wine.
Really? Y'all did?
Oh yeah, Dad was real good at making sauerkraut. We'd get a big,
Boy, sauerkraut with
clay,
apples in it, remember?
every year we would make a big barrel of sauerkraut.
Really?
Not a
And
barrel,
Apples
rock.
too. You remember the apples? The apples were better than
I
sauerkraut.
don't remember. Did we ever buy a jar and put
No,
it in
No,
Stayed
they
in
was
a
all
big
in
crop.
big rocks.
Stayed
Don't you
in a
remember
big
it had big rocks on the top
Yeah.
of it?
What
Now,
about-
getting back,
Yeah.
you were asking me about the family.
Uh-huh.
The Schwartz family was a very, very loving family. The sisters and the brother, there's nothing that they wouldn't do for one another. If one was in trouble, they all came. They all worked. If Aunt Rosie wasn't doing well, then the sisters here would go and make patches. If Aunt Dora was having problems, they'd make patches. And they always would see that
Packages? You mean food?
packages of food.
Package,
Oh, really?
whatever
Well,
they,
you know, food, if they need
money,
they help
They,
each other. And one thing about it, if Dad, I remember when I was a kid, Dad used to send money back to his brother and his sister. I remember both of them in Poland. And
Money or packages?
money, and
packages,
pecans
I mean,
too. Pecans they used to send
Yeah.
every year. Pecans.
Pecans.
What was
And,
his sister's name?
the sister.
Rachel, wasn't it?
No.
No.
Ruchel Malamed, yeah?
Yeah,
Ruchel
Ruchel.
Malamed.
All right, so what did I say?
Ruchel and,
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, even our families today are real close. I mean, you can see this here. Our children all grew up together. Of course, now everybody's moved off and they have their own lives to lead. But if they have any problems, I believe all of them would still gather around because for some reason we're just one of those close-knit families that we think a lot of each other.
Yeah.
And we'd do anything for each other. I don't think
In fact, the Gutsake Uncle Joe sent my mother and father tickets to come to America.
Uh-huh.
And the first where they came to New York, and the three sisters, Aunt Esther, Aunt Rosie, and Aunt Dora picked them up at the Ellis Island with the, and Hannah was already in Wharton already.
yeah, they were.
And Esther was also in Wharton then.
Was she already in Wharton?
They opened their
already
store here in
Wharton,
1913. I think they opened their
All
store
right,
in Bay
then, all
City.
right, then it was just Aunt Dora and Aunt Rosie
Uh-huh.
went and picked up, and Uncle Benny. They picked them up in New York,
Uh-huh.
and
And Esther was here in 1930.
there never was a Saturday night that when we closed the store, that Pop and Mama and all the kids would get in the car
and Aunt Esther.
and Aunt Esther and we'd drive halfway to Wharton.
Yeah,
Remember?
the silo's still there.
Yeah, the silo is still there where we met Aunt Dora and Uncle Benny. Every Saturday night. That was a ritual.
Did anybody else go along too? Joe Schwartz, he didn't come along?
No,
No,
Joe
no,
Schwartz.
just
Just the Waddlers.
Joe Schwartz passed
Uncle
away.
Benny. They would meet, and matter of fact, it's funny, you know, sometimes these things come over in your mind. On Sunday, we'd eat lunch, or we'd pack up early in the morning and pack up some food, and we'd go to Wharton. Of course, to begin with, the Waddlers, Uncle Benny, lived in Hungerford, Texas.
Uh-huh.
And we'd drive to Hungerford, spend the day, the day, and come home in the evening, late in the evening. And of course, when Uncle Benny and that door moved to Wharton, there's the same ritual, Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. As a matter of fact, December 7, 1941, which is Pearl Harbor Day, Sidney, no, you were already in here. You were afraid the war was going to end. Just me and Sidney.
No. I didn't go to the Army till December the 25th.
Well, I don't remember. I remember me and Sidney were in the car. Sidney and I were in the car. It used to be
Thornton, Noble Thornton.
Noble Thornton had a filling station, Humble Station. And news report came over that Pearl Harbor had been bombed.
You was here.
And I was sitting in the car listening
but you
to
went home
it.
that day. You went
And
somewhere.
Sidney was talking to the station attendant.
Well, you might have
or
went to
something.
Wharton with us that day.
And I
Maybe you
said,
didn't go to the
Sidney,
gas
you know, I
Remember,
think
just like it
we're at
happened
war.
last week.
Yeah.
I think
All
we're
three
at
of us
war.
were there.
Said they bombed someplace called Pearl Harbor. And we listened, sure enough, it came over the radio again. And all evening it kept repeating. And we were on our way, filling the car up so we could go to Wharton and spend the Sunday with the Waddlers.
Uh-huh.
The Schwartzes were, I don't know,
They were more aloof.
But I'll tell you, before the Gutsake Uncle Benny moved to Wharton, we also went to Wharton every Sunday. And we went to
That's
Aunt
Aunt
Hannah,
Hannah.
and we went to Aunt Hannah. We used to stay at Aunt Hannah's house, and we sure stayed over there and every Sunday and for bring, and then we'd go back home. But then when the Gutsake Uncle Benny came, then we started going to. Am I right?
What do you remember? What do you remember specifically? Tell me some characteristics and things you remember about Joe Schwartz.
Joe Schwartz was a very full-hearted giving man, just like the sisters. He had a big heart. He loved his family,
He was a very successful businessman,
and he
wasn't
was
he?
a very successful businessman. He worked hard all his life.
What kind of store did he have?
He had a dry goods store,
Only one?
only one dry goods store, and he started on a horse with a horse and buggy,
Uh-huh.
and then from the horse and buggy, he finally bought it. He got enough where he could open a little store in Wharton, Texas.
Didn't he own some farms and things, though? He was raising cotton and stuff like that?
Yeah,
too?
he bought some
he
land.
Another thing I might mention is he was the first Jewish Mason in Wharton, and at that time the Ku Klux Klan was very, very strong in all this area. He was the first Jewish Mason. He was the first Jew to serve on the school board. He served for about, I guess, 20, 25 years
Mm-hmm.
on the school board. He was known all over the area for his philanthropies.
And he also sent many Christian people to become doctors. And a lot of the doctors in Wharton,
Uh-huh.
because of him, had an education. Otherwise, they never would have become doctors.
What about Aunt Hannah and Uncle Lizzie? What do you remember about them?
Uncle Lizzie used to always ask, would come in, who called for you? That was his
I
biggest
come
joke.
here to Wharton.
Yeah.
Who called for you?
Who called for you?
Yeah.
Did I tell you to come?
Yeah.
He'd say what?
Did I tell you to come?
Oh, really?
There you go.
I would like to back up and go back to the story about Aunt Esther.
Go ahead.
I think you left out some of the important little details and things that she would laugh about, and yet she may have cried in those days. When she came over, came to this country, she was 11 years old. Am I not right?
Right.
That's right.
Something like- And I don't know how many dollars they sent with her, a few dollars to carry in her purse when she got here, or in a bag or somewhere, to have a little security, some money. And somebody stole her money on the boat when she was coming over, 11 years old, can you imagine? And so when she got here, she had no money. Well, I do not remember the details of who met her. Do you know who met her?
It's been Aunt Hannah.
Probably
Aunt
Aunt Rosie and.
Aunt Rosie came with her. They were two children traveling together.
It must have been
Is that what it
Hannah.
was?
But they had to come to, I thought they came in New York.
They did come in New York.
Well, now Aunt Hannah was in Texas.
No.
She was in New York too. Okay.
1903. They came 1903.
Okay.
1903.
Well, you can imagine how this 11-year-old girl felt without her money or no one to help her or guide her. And not sure that there would be somebody there to meet her in a strange country. Well, and I sort of strongly remember that story about her.
I'll say one thing about Dad. When he came to this country, he couldn't write a word of English. And after several years, he wrote the prettiest handwriting I've ever seen in my life. He had a perfect handwriting. And he all taught it himself. Every bit of it he taught himself.
Uncle Manuel, you told me a story about his signature, writing his signature, and something that Jim Lewis told him. I don't remember. I thought you told me that story.
That was my signature.
Oh, it was your signature.
Mr. McDonald told me I'd be ashamed. He couldn't even read my name.
Really?
So I told him if I wrote it any other way, the bank wouldn't accept my checks.
Oh, really? How long ago was it? Was that a long time ago? Or?
Oh, gosh, I would assume it must have been at least 40 years.
Oh, you were in business though already.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a little while.
You also meant, Mark, a minute ago that the Gutsacum Joe was the first Mason in Wharton, Texas. Well, your grandfather and my father was the first Mason in Bay City, Texas. And that was also during the time there was a lot of Ku Klux Klan. And Daddy remembers when he came to this country, he remembers the last colored person hung on the courthouse square was hung when he was in Wharton, Texas. When he came from Europe, they hung a colored man. He says he was one day, everybody was running to the courthouse. He said, "What's happening? What's happening? They're gonna have a hanging. They're gonna have a hanging." But then, and everyone was running, all dressed up. They all ran to the courthouse to want to see the guy get hung.
Did he go too?
Yeah, no, he saw him when he saw him. He got sick. He couldn't stand. He had to walk.
Really?
Papa was a very kind person, but very few people knew it. Several years ago, a young man walked into our store. Was it in the store?
Several years ago.
No.
It's been 20. It's been.
Oh yeah.
This young man came to the store and said, "I want to look for a little short man who had a grocery store in town. I promised him
No.
I want to buy him a pair of shoes." I said, "What do you want to buy him a pair of shoes for?" He says, "Well, I used to live in Palacios. Tell me if I'm right or wrong."
Well,
Yeah,
I think
you're right.
you ought to begin. The story actually began, Herman, if you remember. This fella, we had already been in business, I guess maybe 5 or 10 years. And this young fellow was walking up and down in front of our store. And I don't remember if it was I or Herman at that time, asking him who he's looking for. And the young man says, "I'm looking for a little short man, about so tall, and wore real thick glasses." Of course, that to me would describe Dad, to a T. So we told him, it says that at that time Dad had had an operation. He was in Wharton at the hospital. We told the fellow that Dad was at the hospital in Wharton, and that we were going there that night. And he said, "Well, I definitely want to go visit with him." And of course, he never said anything about why or anything. So we went to Wharton. He went with us. And when he walked the door, he pointed to Dad, and he says, "That's the man I've been looking for." And then he told us this story. He said, in 1939 or 40, he was at that time, I think, 16 years old. And he'd run away from home. It was cold. It was December. Am I right, Herman?
Yeah.
It was December. It was very cold outside. And he was walking in front of Dad's little grocery store. And Dad went out. He says, "Are you looking for your parents, son?" He says, "No." He says, "I'm running away from home." And this is the story the young man told us. So Dad said, "Well, he was barefooted and didn't have any clothes, just whatever clothes he had on him." So Dad told him, says, "Come on now, we'll get something to eat." And this young man said, he brought me over here to this wooden building, and there was a little old lady there, and she was cooking in her store. And oh, the food smelled so good, and I was starved. And it says the little lady fed me, And when they got through eating, this little man told me, says, come on, I'm going to go buy you a pair of shoes. I want you to go back home. And so he took me across the street, somewhere over there, and he pointed out there was somebody, Bill Tillman at that time, had a dry goods store over there. And the little man took me in this man's store and told him to give me a pair of shoes, and he was going to pay for them. And he told this man, he said, well, the boy's running away from home, and I told him I'd buy a pair of shoes and go back home. And Mr. Tillman says, no, we'll split it. I'll pay half and you pay half. He says, no, I told him I'd buy him the shoes. And if I'm not mistaken, he gave him a coat. Bill Tillman gave him a coat. And they thought he gave him a few, maybe $1 or $2 to get back to Palacios, whatever, you know, bus, whatever it was. And anyway, the young man somehow got to Houston, and he joined the Army. And this, like I say, 10 years later is when he came back to Bay City, and he was selling seat covers, and he was fairly successful. Herman, it must have been long more than 10 years because
It was
he had a
after
son.
the war.
Yeah, his son. Don't you remember? His son was about 15, 16
right,
years old. And go ahead and you can finish.
Nah, and he says, I've got to buy this man a pair of shoes, because I told myself that if I ever live through this here, I'm going back to Bay City and buy this short man a pair of shoes. And sure enough, he went and got his size and everything and bought him a pair of shoes. And Papa didn't want to take them. He says, I owe it to you. And that's where it ended. The boy left and we never ever seen him.
He brought his son by one time. That was the last we
I'm
ever
sure
saw
there
him.
are many other stories, but
Right.
we didn't.
Oh, I remember during the Depression, of course, at that time a lot of people called them bums or hobos, but they weren't bums or hobos. There were just people out down on the luck who couldn't find work or anything and were traveling through the country. And we always had, you remember, we always had a loaf of bread open in the store, and
Never let anybody go hungry.
and we always had a loaf of bread
Never let
open in the
anybody go
store.
hungry.
And we'd give a
Or
slice of, you know, salami, not kosher, but
Sausage.
sausage. And they, we always say that they had something to eat, and you know, before they went on the way farther.
They would never send them along, huh?
That's right.
Soup or anything like that to give them to, or no?
Not too much soup.
Not too much soup.
Mostly meat and bread.
Uh-huh.
You know, stuff that they have in the
Sardines.
store. Cheese,
Sardines.
sardines.
I would like to put this down for the records. I think my father-in-law, Papa Den, we call him. When he came to this country, he came. They check you in at port, I guess, and you come into America, and they ask you your name, and if they can't spell your name, they change your name,
Right.
or you can change your name. And he says that is their name, Den.
Yeah.
However, he had a brother that lived in New York that he talked about. I never met the brother. I don't know about the other two.
I think Sidney's the only one that ever met
So
him.
your father and your mother had met the other brother. They did meet him. And he would spell his name a little different than my father-in-law did.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
D-A-N-N.
Yeah.
And no one really knows how that came about. But thought it would be all right for
That's
the
good.
records.
Yeah, it's good. What about your mother? What other things do you remember about your mother? Anything in particular?
I
Anything?
remember the Gutzeka Mama for Shabbos. It was very important. We always had to put clean clothes on. I always had a white shirt, clean pants, and the Gutzeka Papa would daven. And after the davening, she would call, he'd say, he'd nod to her and say, go, it's time for Kiddush. And she'd come out on the porch and say, Kiddush, Kiddush. And after a few years, all the neighbors, they would almost have it timed. All the Gentile neighbors, when the Gutzeka Mama would come on the porch, they'd holler, Kiddush, Kiddush, and we'd all start running like chickens.
Is that right?
Yeah, we had one maid, a real tall maid.
Londa Lush.
Yeah, you remember?
Judy
Yeah.
Jalopka.
Judy Jalopka. And
A Vicer or
a
Shred?
vice,
A Bohemian girl.
and Bohemian girl.
Judy Jalefka?
And, yeah, and oh, I guess we were already, you know,
Pretty
they
much
were
up.
maybe in their teens, and I was, you know, Herman maybe was 13, Cindy might have been 10.
Well, we
So,
were living on
yeah,
Avenue C, weren't we?
she would go to the door. That was her job to go to the Friday night, and she knew exactly when to go to the door and holler, "Kiddish!"
She gets a kiddish, and then what would happen?
Yeah. Then we'd run in, and you know, we were ready for the meetup.
All the Den kids, not the other neighborhood kids or
just
anything.
Meyer,
Yeah.
we lived in a very small house
This on Avenue F or on Avenue C?
on Avenue F.
Uh-huh.
And I remember Papa remodeling the house. We had the whole back end was for the boys. Remember, we slept on a back porch. And then on the end of the back porch was our only toilet.
In the
And
house?
we had a fight to get to the toilet.
It was it was in a room, enclosed room, though, no?
Just closed the room in. The house was, well, like this was a house, and on that end was the toilet.
Well, they closed in. You remember
The
they
reason
closed
they-
in the
reason
back
we built,
porch.
the reason we built this room on, that's when the Gutsenik and Esther got divorced from her husband. And they didn't want Aunt Esther to live by herself anymore, so they built this room. They asked if she would move in, if they would build her room. And she said yes, so they built a room for the boys, and the Gutsenik and Esther took our room.
This was on Avenue C or Avenue F?
On Avenue C.
Well, I don't remember.
Avenue F, Avenue
I
F.
thought there
This
was
little house
one
on Avenue
bedroom originally. There was one bedroom,
Right.
a living room, a dining room, and the
There was
kitchen.
Right.
a bedroom in the front. The front
That's
room was
right.
the bedroom. That's where Ethel was born, I can remember that.
Yeah, I know.
And then on the other one's living room,
Then there was a living
and the
room.
dining room was the back.
Dining room was
And the
next,
kitchen was the
and the
back.
kitchen's on the back. And then the little porch was built on past the kitchen.
Where did that? I can't recall.
And
Yeah,
that's just lived in the first, and next to Pop and Mom.
And
Right
the
in
living
front,
room.
they had a couch here.
And the little couch.
Okay, that
I remember
answers my question.
the happiest day of my father's life, I'm gonna tell you. He brought home a record, a photograph,
Oh,
remember?
yeah.
Old cracked photograph. And to us, that was the greatest achievement in our life.
There was no radio at that time.
Was it before radio?
That was before radio.
What kind of records would you listen to?
First radio,
It
first radio.
stood
we
up
ever-
about this high, and
Photograph.
The
a
first,
Victrola.
Victrola.
The
You wind
first-
it up.
Similar to the one you have.
the first photograph radio that I recall. You
that
remember Benny?
Atwater Kent. You
Well,
remember?
no, Benny Ham had
Yeah,
a
the
crystal
little-
set.
Yeah, he had a headset.
Our neighbor, he had put together a headset, and we'd go over
Made a
this.
crystal set.
He had an antenna, the wire strung all the way around his
Uh-huh.
house, and we'd go over there and we'd put these earphones on our ears. We could hear,
Huh.
you know,
What
hear music. I think it was KPRC.
what kind of records would your father listen to on the record player?
We had Jewish records.
They were Jewish records that he listened to.
Yeshua, Rosenblatt, davening and singing and all
Okay.
that. And
Dan, you might remember.
With some classical also.
Yeah, classic.
So-
then I remember the first radio we got. We had it in the corner, moved the record player up front, you remember, right by the door, and put the radio over there. And we'd
Across
sit there all night long listening to Eddie Cantor and
Al Jones.
Al Jolson.
Okay, let me-
that was living.
Let me push ahead a little bit. Now, with the births of the three of the children, each one, what do you call hearing anything about your birth, Uncle Herman? You were born on June the 19th,
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth,
I
1921.
was born in Aunt Hannah's house.
Uh-huh.
And Uncle Izzy, and the doctor that brought me to this world was Dr. Green Davis.
Uh-huh.
And Papa was the most nervous person you ever saw.
How do you
I
know
didn't
research?
see it. I've been told. So
You
he
know
got always in Dr. Green Davis's way. He says, "Joe, hurry up and get a watermelon." So Dad didn't know whether that was a religion or whether it was a medical process.
Yeah.
So he ran down and bought a watermelon. He just wanted to get him out of the house.
Oh, really? Why was he so nervous about that? You know, they lost a child in Europe.
They
I know
lost a child in Europe,
that. Uh-huh.
and I don't know what the reason for it.
Okay.
But I can remember Ethel's birth.
Well, let me ask. Let's go first to Dad. Where were you born?
I was born in Bay City,
Where at?
on 7th Street, right where the bank is today.
You born in Esther Store?
That's the store, yeah.
Why were you born in Esther Store?
Gutsy come out was going to the hospital. That's as far as she got. They called Dr. Luke to come deliver me at the
And did anybody ever say anything
You've always
about?
been fast.
Has anybody ever say anything about the birth at all? Did anybody ever tell you anything? Your mother?
No, they got that's normal birth.
Your mother didn't say?
I
No.
always had normal birth. I think he had a little trouble with Ethel.
And I know that the reason Manuel was born in Wharton, they went to for Yuntif, and he was born on right after Rosh Hashanah.
I was born on Rosh Hashanah.
First day,
and
second day.
I think it was the second day.
Yes, then.
What's the date you were born?
No,
September.
it was the first day. I was born the same day.
Ma-
Austin was
Austin was
born.
born?
Austin was born on Rosh Hashanah the same day, the first day.
Now you were born in September.
I was born September 12th.
September 12th. And what year?
1926.
26th. Okay. And that was in Wharton. At Aunt Hannah's
At Aunt
house.
Hannah's house.
So
We always went to Aunt Hannah's house.
We stayed at Aunt
We
Hannah's
stayed
house.
during the holidays. I don't know before, but I do recall, as long as I can remember, we always spent the holidays at Aunt Hannah's house.
okay.
No.
And
Don't you remember we had stayed at the Riverside Hotel sometime?
No.
I remember the Cogans.
You and
I remember
I
the
did.
Cogans staying always
You
at
and
the
I did.
Riverside.
Then we're gonna get into that in just a little while. What about Ethel's birth? I heard you all tell stories about that.
Well, I don't know how old I was when Ethel was born,
You must.
but I wanted to see what was happening.
Yeah.
And she was born in the front bedroom, and the doctor had to kick me and,
It was at
Then
night.
I-
It was at night. I remember it's dark.
yeah, Dr. Luce,
Because we were going to sleep, and they would try to put us to sleep before she was delivered. And
Herman
they kept.
must have been about 10 years old.
I must have been 10 years old.
Sidney maybe
I was
8.
very.
Oh, Sidney-
Do you recall?
I don't.
You couldn't- you were
I was
3 years
2
old, 2 or 3,
I was
yeah.
2 years old. No way.
And they were throwing pillows
Oh,
on us.
incidentally, Meyer, Ethel was our little sister,
Yes.
and we lost her in 1958.
57.
7.
Yeah. We'll
57?
yeah. We'll get into that in a little while. But she was Ethel Lee was her name, right?
Ethel
Yeah.
Lee.
Ethelea. And so what you were saying, Dad? They were throwing pillows on top of you, or what?
Yeah, and covered us with blankets. And Esther and the doctor and the papa, they didn't know how to get rid of us. And they'd shut one door and we'd go around the other door.
Had 2 doors in the bedroom.
Y'all were trying to watch, or what?
Yeah, we tried
Well,
to
see what was
the
happening.
doctor says he brings the baby in the suitcase. We want to see it come
I
out.
want to see how I took it out of the suitcase.
Who told you that, Dr. Lewis?
Dr. Luce. I can't bring her out if y'all gonna watch. Y'all have to
Is
go.
that- And what was your mother? Was in a lot of pain and everything, or what? You don't recall?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
That I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was not a picnic.
Okay. So now we talked a little about Shabbos. What about your Shabbos table? What? Do you remember anything specific about the Shabbos table in the
Yes.
house?
We had a ritual table.
We had a full table. We had a 7-course meal. First we started, if I'm not mistaken, with the filter
Filter
fish,
fish.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Then we had a soup.
Let me ask you. Let's back up a little bit. Let's back up a little. What? First of all, did your father before he died? Did he daven alone on Friday
Yes,
evening?
he davened alone.
Daven alone on
It
Friday
was
evening.
Years later,
We said,
we'd have after we'd moved to Avenue C, they'd have, I guess, during the war is when it started. The
Organized-
congregation would come over to his house and
Before dinner or after dinner?
before dinner.
And we'd have our Friday night services. And for a while, Bob Payne would conduct service, say the prayers.
Yes.
And it was between Dad and Bob Payne. I guess they were the only ones that could.
Now, this is during the war years.
Papa was alive. Papa davened.
I
Bob
tell you, Max
no,
Epstein
Bob Payne.
davened too.
Max
I remember-
Epstein also.
Yeah.
Max
All right,
Epstein
let's go back. Let's go back earlier years again. Before there was an organized minion, your father would daven alone, right?
Right.
He'd
Correct.
call you all in for kiddush.
That's right.
Okay. He would make kiddush himself.
He would
Yes.
make kiddush himself.
Okay. Now after kiddush, did he go to wash his hands?
Yes, sir. He
Definitely.
sure did.
Did you all also follow him and wash your hands with a cup?
As we got older, when we were real young, I don't remember.
I
but
can't remember.
As we get older, we would follow him
I
and
can always
With the
remember
satyrs we did.
I cut the hollow.
Well, wait a second. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back. I'm asking specifically about the ritual of washing hands. Do you know for a fact you saw him get up from the table and
Right,
go into
yeah,
the
yes,
go in the kitchen? Did he wash it with a cup? Did he pour the water out of the cup, or did he wash
I
it?
think he poured the water from this faucet into a cup
and
and then into his
That's
And
right.
how did you ever watch him wash his hands? Do you
Yeah,
recall how he
3
did it?
times.
Did he pour the cup over his hand so many times, or
Right,
do you
right.
recall?
Right, he put it over the hand 3 times.
Okay, now before he did this, did he sing Shalom Aleichem at the table?
No.
Well, we don't know. I
I
can't
don't
remember.
remember.
Did you ever recall him singing to your mother Eishes Chayil?
No.
The song Eishes Chayil? No? What about Niggin? Did you ever hear him singing a melody at the table without words, just
Yes.
any
yes.
kind of a...
He always
hum
done
tune.
that underneath his breath. So,
But there's certain tunes he would use.
yeah.
He would da 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 da. You know, different.
You used to make a melody at the Shabbos
Right.
table, you recall that?
Right, I sure do. Yes, sir.
So then he would wash his hands, he'd come back to the table. Would he speak from the time he washed his hands, or was it always
speaking,
quiet?
And also after he cut the challah, you didn't say nothing. After the kiddush, you didn't say nothing. You went and washed your hands,
Mhm.
came back, cut the challah, and after you ate the challah, you could speak, but not before that. Till you ate the challah, you couldn't talk.
Is that what you all recall the same thing?
Am I right?
Mumble?
You remember?
I
Did
can't.
he mumble things like under his breath?
No, he wouldn't say nothing.
I'll say this for him. He was a very nervous.
Did he sprinkle salt on the challah too
Yes.
after he cut it?
Yes, sir.
Definitely.
Uh-huh.
He what he did, he cut the challah, cut a slice and salted, and give one to Mama, and then he cut another slice and gave it to himself.
No,
So
the first one he
then all the rest of us came after that.
It seems to me that he would cut a slice and take a bite out of it,
That's
salt it, and then take a bite out of it,
Right.
and then hand it to someone else.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You'd sit, get at the guts like a mama, and
Yeah.
then he'd give guts, and then the rest of us would get a piece of
Yeah.
challah.
Okay.
But he always cut it.
He always
never
cut
broke it.
all our bread.
Now what about after he ate Shabbos meal? Did he bench? Did he
Yes, he did.
Yes.
always after a meal he would bench?
Always.
And did you all bench with him, or y'all didn't know? Y'all just leave the
we
table.
we got up
Our
after we
children
ate.
got up and he was back. They were, you know, the boys, you know how kids are.
All right. What about? Let me ask you another question. At those days, in the earlier years, did you ever wear a lopsideckel? Did you?
Oh, yes.
I sure did.
We were lost.
You did.
Yes.
Up until what? Up until what age?
I
Here we
tried to
got
hide
to-
the cinches
I guess
in my
till we-
pocket.
You what? You hide them in your pocket?
About
I
fourth,
hide
fifth
the
grade.
cinches in my pocket.
We
Y'all-
got 4th or 5th grade, wasn't it, Herman?
Oh, yeah, how
About
Up to
old?
about the fourth grade, then I just wouldn't wear them no more.
None of you
What
would
about
wear them
you,
anymore.
Sidney? How old were you? Do you remember when you stopped wearing them?
Who, me? The same. Maybe I went a little bit longer, Herman, because I was always trying to be a rabbi.
So you quit wearing them? Why? Because you were embarrassed to wear them?
I think I got into junior high before I quit.
I'll tell you a little secret.
Did your father? Was it because did your father tell you to stop wearing them, or did you?
No, I just quit wearing them.
Did any of your little Gentile friends want to know what that was?
Yeah. We tell them.
Sure did.
What did you call them?
Lopsideckel.
Uh-huh.
Cinches, I
We
call them cinches.
didn't know what they were. We knew we were supposed to wear.
And that was all. Did y'all daven at nighttime when you went to bed? Did you say
No, I remember
Shema?
Somebody-
The Gutsake Mama used to daven every night. Her say the prayers, and Aunt Esther, the Gutsake and
Did
Esther.
you say prayers also?
Yeah.
Did you ever? You didn't say Modiani in the morning?
In the morning, used to say
In the morning, I
Mariani.
did Modiani and
Mom
Krishna
got
at
up in the
night.
morning and she
And what
got
night?
up
What?
all the time.
Kriya Shema you said at night?
At night, Krishna.
You did.
Yes, sir.
Every night.
Every night.
Organized? Y'all did it together before you went to bed, or
Oh.
you did it each separately?
Each day is separate.
Okay, what about the on Shabbos morning? Was your father daven in the morning?
Papa davened every morning.
Daven every
He
morning.
davened every morning with Toss and Philip.
Uh-huh. Except
And I
Shabbos.
remember when I was in the Boy Scouts, he wouldn't let me go to camp. So there was a preacher here, Reverend Dyche. He says, Joe, I know what your son has to do. I will get up with him every morning and daven before all the rest of the boys up. And believe me, he was there for 2 weeks at Rockport, Texas. He'd wake me up. He says, all right, Herman, let's go daven.
Huh.
And that same
he sat
preacher,
there and davened with me, laying my tefillin and my talis and tefillin, and he davened with me.
Huh.
and that same thing happened when I went to Carlsbad, New Mexico with the student. The Papa, Gutsake Papa wouldn't let me go, and I promised I would daven. So I told Reverend Dyche, says, if you can talk to my father and tell him you'll see that, say my, put on my talis and fill him, he'll let me go to New Mexico to
Uh-huh.
Carlsbad. So he went over and talked to Papa because he knew because
And he
Herman
said-
was
and he said he
a
would.
year earlier. And he said he would do it if I promised I would daven every morning. And I did. I davened every morning. He davened with me every morning.
What about
How old were you?
13.
14.
What about Pesach? What do you recall about Pesach?
We got drunk.
Pesach was very beautiful. We all looked forward to that because it was everything in the house had to be taken out. We cleaned the house completely out.
We even cleaned the trunk of the car out.
Yeah, everything had.
We had to clean the trunk of the
The trunk
car
of the
because
car?
there might be comets in the trunk.
Yeah.
And then we'd go to Houston, we'd buy the matzahs. It seemed like he used to buy 15 pounds of matzahs. Dad had a list.
That list.
And he went just by the list. When Pesach was over, the last matzah was eaten, except the avocado. This is a fact. There was nothing left. There was,
He had it down to an art.
He had it down to an art.
What about and also the night before Pesach, you always go bedikas chumetz around the house.
Right.
With
Oh
the,
yeah.
it was always just the immediate family that would do that.
The family and the kids.
What about sukkahs? What do you call about sukkahs in the house when you're growing up? Anything, any kind of observance at all?
We had a sukkahs 3 or 4 different times. He had sukkahs.
We had the suckers on Avenue C.
That's a sukkah that you see about where the wash house used to
That's
be.
right.
Did you
Yeah.
decorate it? Did you decorate it?
Yeah, we
Decorated.
decorated.
It's beautiful. We
And we
had
ate
lunch.
meals out there. We ate meals at the
That's
sukkah.
when your mother was sick already.
No,
that used to be
no.
Mama
That was
was-
not on C, that was.
That was that.
You remember when Mama,
Avenue
we did
I.
have,
That was on
when
Avenue
they
I.
were on
Avenue
Avenue I, you remember they had a sukkah there?
That's what I'm thinking.
Mama
Oh,
was
you're talking about
always
Avenue
C.
C.
Yeah.
Mama was
See,
already
I
sick.
good remember y'all got. You remember when the rice mill burned up?
Oh,
Yeah, I remember.
And we all burned the house up.
Yeah.
They threw you
Sparks
up on the
came,
roof
sparks.
and put you.
Bark came to the roof.
There was a fire.
There was a
A
rice
rice
mill
mill.
behind our house.
On Avenue F.
On Avenue F.
Yeah.
And it caught fire one night. There was a big fire.
Oh, that
And,
thing was 5 or
I
6
don't know how
foot.
Herman got on top of the roof, but we'd fill buckets of water up and pour the water on the roof
Yeah.
to keep the
Keep it from-
Cinders from starting a
cinders
fire?
from catching the house on fire.
Right. What about Shavuos? Do you remember anything about Shavuos? Wasn't a holiday that was really observed in the house, except that you served milking. Probably they served.
You gotta think about
What
what
holiday was you?
Shavuos.
Shavuos Puris.
That's Yom Kippur.
Huh?
Yom Kippur.
That was on Shavuos. They always had milk dishes.
Dairy.
During
They served dairy.
And that's
I remember
Oh,
that.
I'll tell you this.
That was
See,
chicken.
Oh, here you go.
We had a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Zabudusky. He had come to Bay City on Thursdays because we needed to pray. We wanted fresh chicken for
Shabbos.
Shabbos. And he was a sheriff, and he would slaughter the chickens for the Kogans and our family. I think there were only
Only 2 of them, yeah.
Chickens,
he-
not beef.
No beef.
and us used to have a pen of chickens in the back of our store. She used to buy chickens. And I'll never forget, they'd tie the chicken's legs up, and the rabbi would cut its throat and throw it out in the yard. Of course, the chicken run around.
You know what? He used to pick the feathers off
Yeah.
his neck like this here.
This is Rabbi Zabudowski?
Yeah. Pick the feathers off. Now the little knife like a one cut and that was it.
Huh.
But you know, I think that knife was really a scalpel.
It was a knife.
It didn't have a sharp
It,
point.
it was about that.
It didn't have a sharp point.
It was about that thick
Yes.
and about that long.
It didn't have a sharp point.
No.
Did it close? Did the knife close?
No.
No, it's an open blade knife.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, little
And then
case.
they also had a different knife for a cow.
Had a big
Bigger
knife.
Did you ever see him do a cow too?
Yeah.
I saw him do a cow.
Herman, we used to blow the lungs up so the rabbi said it's kosher.
Yeah.
You'd have to
Feel
blow
the shit, the lungs were.
It was a
Didn't
trade.
have any rips in them or tears.
Uh-huh. Okay. What about Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Now, that was the time when you all would pack up and leave. What?
Oh, we had to be home by at least 4 or 5. The minute school, there was no playing around. We knew we would better be home about, I believe it's 4 o'clock. And the stores were closed, the cars were packed. Of course, we took, on Rosh Hashanah, we took a lot of food in.
Uh-huh.
And everything was ready to go. We left exactly, you could tell the time of day.
Your father must have been very nervous on that time of
yes,
year
he was
too.
very, very nervous. And we'd go into Wharton.
Uh-huh.
And of course, when Rosh Hashanah would end, if it was on a Saturday, we'd pack up the car. We were we were ready to go. We didn't waste any time. We come back to Bay City, which was, at that time, you got the good roads. You can make it in a half, still make it in a half hour.
What do you mean
45
good roads? It took us 4 hours one time.
You remember one time, but I remember many times we used to open the store Saturday night at about 6:30, 7 o'clock.
That's when we had better cars though.
You remember?
When you had that old touring cars, you remember that touring car? You
I remember sitting on the side of the road in Wharton, right on the other side of Lane City, on a curb. We couldn't drive the car.
We had to go get
Somebody had to go get a bunch of mules to pull us out
They
of
got
the, out
Jack
of the
Ross,
mud.
didn't they?
But they also would go home from Wharton through Pledger, but
When that
I think
road
it
was, when that
Pledger.
road
They
was,
didn't go the way we all go this way now that it's a nice paved highway. That's
went through
what I was
Pledger.
told.
That's right.
what, and you would stay with Aunt
Hannah.
Hannah? You never stayed with the Waddlers?
Yeah.
No.
I
Yeah.
do remember we
When you
did
remember
stay-
your arm was broke, we was
Yeah,
there
I
to
had a broken collarbone. Matter of fact, I think I broke it the day of, yeah, and the bed had
Bed bug.
bed bugs in it. And they got up under they used to strap you like this. And they got up under my bandages. Oh, I was miserable. I cried all night long. It was terrible.
You were a little boy then when you were?
Yeah.
I was a kid.
He was dancing with the
But
dogs.
I was
Like we would.
I was playing with some kid in the schoolyard, and he threw me over his shoulder somehow. I fell on my collarbone, broke.
Huh. So that was around Rosh Hashanah. What other things you remember about
I'll tell you a good story.
you were talking about
Rosh
Shlugapura. What about Shlugapura? You were talking about,
Let me tell you this story about Rosh Hashanah. All the boys didn't want to stay in shul, so we used to go across the street from the shul. Remember? And there was a big porch, and the Smith brothers,
Am Smith.
Am Smith's sons, had a very good thing. They used to feed us candy, X-Lax, and
Females.
Vitamins.
yeah.
And then we all
We
messed
go
up
to
the other.
shul, we couldn't get out.
Now, there was another.
What happened?
Y'all have sense enough.
Y'all chewed the yeah.
Kids, we were kids.
And what happened?
We had to go to the bathroom. So all three of us pulled
That
out.
was a laxative, Meyer.
Yeah, oh, there was a three of y'all. They gave it to all three of you.
Yeah.
And Albert Colgate and Samuel Colgate.
Sammy Colgate, Albert Colgate.
So what happened? Did you?
Huh?
Did you
Our bowels moved.
All of us hit the bathroom at the same time. It wasn't but one bathroom.
so what?
The girls in the family, they didn't bother me
No,
much.
no.
So what did your folks? Were your folks upset about it or anything?
Oh, they were. They called big boy. They called Grace Yingen. Grace Yingen.
Grubber Yingen.
Grubber Yingen. Yeah.
And
And
their
then-
father,
Then I told you last night about when we were kids. They had a Rexana. Used to bring a buggy up to the guys at Hannah's house.
Who was Rexana? She was.
Rexana was a colored woman, an old colored woman. She must have been about 60 years old.
67.
And
or
she
maybe
put us
older.
all on the buggy, and then when she takes it all over to the cemetery, and then we
All
we
over
told
the
the
cemetery.
Guthrie mom and the Guthrie pop they wanted to kill her because it's young.
They wanted to kill her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not supposed to be riding around. We're not supposed to be carrying these kids to the cemetery on Yontif.
Yeah.
It's the hottest holiday of the year, and you take them out. They were real hot at her that time. Remember?
What did she do? She worked for somebody there.
She worked for
she worked for
Hannah.
Hannah.
Oh, she worked for Aunt Hannah. So they yelled at her for that.
I'll tell you another little story. Am Smith was my godfather.
Uh huh.
And when I had a breast, I took a bite out of his hand.
Your second breast, the
The
first
second
breast.
breast,
Yeah.
I actually cut his hand.
Oh yeah.
Good.
And every time he see me, he's sure, Mom, sir, Mom.
He put his hand up like that.
He
Really?
shoved the cut.
Mom,
Very big.
Oh, really? Who used to do like this here when he would?
That's Ben Davis.
Oh, he would used to do that.
See,
Oh, he did have
He was a
he
only
University
had,
of Texas man.
The
These
thumb
two
and
fingers
these two
cut off
fingers.
Oh, yeah?
These two fingers
Yeah,
were
so-
cut off.
When would he do that? He'd do that at auctioning Aaliyahs or something, or
Yeah,
what?
when they auction off the Leahs. And he would get up there and say, $300 for Mofter. And they sold. You see, that's how they raised the money.
For the year of
That's
the
how they
dues.
raised money for the show.
Uh
They
huh.
would sell Leah's.
But I think all the old Orthodox
And nobody wrote. You know
synagogues
how
did
they used to
that.
keep
Yeah.
accounting of it, Myron?
How's that?
Uncle Joel of Shulam had cards. And if somebody gave $100 with his finger, he'd mark 100 of one
Uh huh.
on the edge of the card.
Oh, really?
One. zwei, drei.
Huh. What about, well, let's see, I'm gonna move out of the holidays, but I'm sure we're gonna move back into it a little bit. Getting back to your own upbringing, your own religious training, what do you remember about your bar mitzvahs, each one of you respectively? What do you recall? Who taught you for your bar mitzvah?
Rabbi Zadusky.
He was there then.
I think he went through about 5 dozen pencils.
5 dozen. So he taught you for your bar mitzvah, and you had your bar mitzvah in Wharton,
In Wharton, right?
and your folks went with you to Wharton for the bar mitzvah.
Papa did. I can't remember if Mom went.
Yeah, both of them went.
Both of them.
Yeah, the guts take them out, the guts take them out both.
And did all y'all go? Did,
I swear, I can't remember.
did all of y'all go too? The children go also to Wharton for the bar mitzvah?
For Herman's bar mitzvah,
I'm pretty
And how'd you
sure
go by
everybody
train?
went, 'cause I was the first one that got a mitzvah in our whole family.
they
Y'all
really
got-
had a nice affair.
Y'all went by train or what?
No, we
Went by
drove.
car.
Y'all drove.
Yeah.
So and they all went to Wharton, and it was in the old shul or what?
Yes,
the old
the old
children.
And they have a party or anything afterwards?
Oh,
Or-
They had a party in Bay City on a Sunday. I got mitzvah like Friday night and Saturday.
Uh-huh.
And Sunday they had a big barbecue. I think Sidney, your daddy explained to you how they barbecued.
How'd they do that? They
They
explain
made a
it.
barbecue pit out of an onion.
Bread
Bin.
rack.
Onion bin.
No, it was a bread rack.
Bread rack, yeah.
Bread rack.
Yeah.
And
In the ground? They put it in the ground or what?
No, they just put it on
Top
top
of
of
the
the
ground.
ground and bricks around it.
And then
Uh-huh.
put the coals underneath.
Uh-huh.
underneath it.
I
And
see.
put the chicken on the top.
I couldn't tell you how the barbecue tasted, I forgot.
Uh-huh. What did your bar mitzvah consist of? What was it? You
I know
did a
Aunt
whole.
Esther used to make the best potato salad. My wife can make just as good a potato salad as Aunt Esther, but Aunt Esther's had a time and she can't imagine.
What,
Rosie does make good potato salad.
Dad? What about your bar mitzvah? What do you recall?
I'm a mitzvah. I remember they just was real busy at the time, and the Gutsake and Mama and the Gutsake and Esther baked a bunch of cookies and everything, and I just had a kiddish, and they sent me to
Sure.
Wharton. They put me on the train, and I went to Wharton, and the Gutsake Uncle Izzy, I think, picked me up at the train,
I can't remember.
and they took me to the. And that night, I said my speech, and I davened, and I said the next day I had said the brachas and the Haftorah,
Uh-huh.
and then they had a little kiddish afterwards.
And
But
then
I never will forget the gutsake Uncle Joe called my father
he called him on the phone?
and told him, yes, called him on the phone, said, Joe, I never want you to ever do something like this again. You've got to take your children as more important than your business. When they go to a bar mitzvah, you never send them here. You come with them. You don't never send them by themselves. And that's when.
I really don't remember.
You don't remember your bar mitzvah at
I
all?
can't, all I can remember is standing up and, reading
Saying
the
the
house
brachas.
story and saying the brachas.
And do you remember who all was there? Your folks went with you, I'm
I
sure.
I'm sure they must have been, as Sidney says.
Yeah.
The father, the gutsake papa, I don't know about the gutsake mama, the gutsake papa went
But
with
your father, so he didn't tell him that in person. He told him that on the phone.
He told him when he saw him on Sunday when he come to pick me up, he told him too.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And nobody else said anything to him about it? Or did-
Well, yes, the other two uncles told me that it wasn't proper to send the boy by himself, that
Uh-huh.
he should have been there.
What do you recall about your father as far as a disciplinarian?
Very,
We had to toe the line. We had to do it,
And I
never
did all
forget-
the whippings for everybody.
You did?
But you don't deserve it.
But I was the meanest anyway. So.
the story,
I bet you
the-
didn't
I
have
believe
more
I
than
deserve
two
one of the
whippings
best,
in your
one
whole
of the
life.
best stories.
Here's one.
What? You only had 2 whippings in your whole
One of the
life.
best
Oh,
stories I can tell you
no.
about one
I can
Saturday.
remember 3
One,
of them.
one Saturday.
Here you go.
One Saturday, the Gutsake Papa told us Friday night, said, now, y'all be sure tomorrow, Vincent Midland picked up a letter, and I want you and Herman and Manuel to be at the store at 8:30. Now, I mean, at 8:30 sharp, y'all come to the store, you'll be there. So, me and Herman had good intention. We were going to be there at 8:30. But we happened to go across the bridge and we saw a football game.
Baseball.
Baseball. And we decided we were going to play baseball. And we
They
went
needed
out
2 more
there and we
players.
started to play baseball. But Manuel says he wasn't going to go. He says, I'm going to the store because I know what the Gutsake Papa can do. If I don't get to the store, we're going to be there. So he goes to the store, and sure enough, he goes to the door, so it says, Manuel says, where is Herman and Sidney? He says, well, Papa says, oh, they'll be here in a little while. He says, that's not good enough. I asked you where was Herman and Sidney. And he says, well, I tell you, they'll be here in a little while, but there was a baseball game. They thought there was very
Is that the way?
important
Is that the way you recall it? Is that? Do you recall the story? Do you recall the story?
I recall him getting the whipping, but I don't
Oh.
know.
He said, they'll be here right after the baseball game. He says, I didn't tell them to come after the baseball. He says, you stay here with the Gutselica Mama, and I'm gonna
She
go.
wasn't Gutselica then.
If you ever saw
The Gutselica Mama, she's
11-and-a-half-year-old boy move
So-
the refrigerator,
So wait a second. Let's see.
So
Hold
he
on.
leaves the store and comes to the baseball field.
What was his attitude when he got to the baseball game?
Nothing, he just wished like this. Come here, boys. Come on, I want to talk to y'all for a minute.
He wasn't. He'd have a smile on his face, or was
Yeah,
he very
and we
friendly?
knew it. we beat him to the house.
Read my lips.
Is that what-
Read my lips.
Yeah.
He says, me and Herman beat him to the house. So we went to the house, and we got to the house. He took Herman and tied him to one side of the refrigerator, and tied me
He
to the other
tied
side
him. Wait, how did he tie? With
with
what?
a rope. Am I lying?
Oh, come on.
I swear.
How
And
old
then-
could you have been though?
Well, we knew we were big enough
They
to know
knew
the
there's no
difference.
difference.
we
Anyway,
knew he'd made a mistake,
yeah.
let's put it that
So
way.
Herman,
Old enough
he
to
hit.
go to work
This
at
is the
the
funny
store.
part. He hit Herman, and the minute he hit Herman, I started hollering and screaming.
He's that
So
old-
he just hit me one leg, and I screamed and hollered, and he hit Herman again. And he just beat the hell out of Herman. I just sit and screamed.
See, he's all the hard and I got all the beating.
That's the truth.
Was it real brother?
Good story.
Is that's the way it
And
happened?
Manuel was,
And the
Manuel
ice
was
box was-
always,
And the ice box was running all around the kitchen. Herman pulled one way out the other.
I will say, it wasn't a nice box, it was a refrigerator.
Yeah,
We
two more.
were
General
one
Electric
of
and
the
the big-
more
big
affluent
thing.
families after a few years.
Yeah.
We had a nice box, we used to have a nice box.
Uh-huh.
And of course, the ice man come by and put ice in it. And I'll never forget, Dad bought a new Norwich, brand new Norwich refrigerator. It's probably I'd say probably one of the first ones in Bay City. And we had refrigerators.
that's one thing I
You
can say
remember?
for Papa.
And
It's modern.
he had a car.
Everything new he
As soon
had.
as he could afford a car, he bought an automobile. He bought, well, like I say, it's probably one of the first radios.
Uh-huh.
I know one of the Victrolas.
And I'll tell you something else. One thing for Yuntif, everybody got a